Should I do a 1035 exchange? What is a 1035 exchange? A 1035 exchange is a transfer of cash value from one life insurance policy to another. It can be a whole life policy to another whole life. It can be a whole life to universal, universal to whole life. Tax-free transfer, so the cash value transfer is tax-free from an existing life insurance policy to a new policy. So that's what a 1035 exchange is. However, the question again is, should I do it? Because there are pros and cons to this strategy, like any strategy. I want to know what's the benefit and then what is the trade-off. So let's get into it. Some advantages here. New policy design. So when we set up a new policy, we can design the policy however we want. Perhaps when I purchased a policy, perhaps you've done this, you purchased a policy 5 years, 10 years, 20 years ago, and it was not designed to your liking. Now that you've taken in more knowledge, you know how to design a policy, or you know the core fundamentals around policy design and what to look for, and you say, hey, I want a policy that is designed in a specific manner. My old policy did not accomplish that. So perhaps it makes sense to 1035 exchange it. Flexibility. We can design a policy to be very flexible in respect to the premium and PUA limits. We can also set our MEC limit wherever we want. So we talk about policy design very, very frequently. When I pay any amount of money into a policy, where can it go? If I pay $1 in, I can pay a percentage of that dollar toward the premium and then a percentage of that dollar towards the PUA rider, accelerating the cash value growth right off the bat. So how do I minimize that premium? This way I'm committed to a minimal amount and then have the flexibility to add additional PUAs into the policy at my discretion. We can do that, and if we have an old policy with a big bucket of money cash value there and it's not performing or it was not set up properly, it may or may not make sense to 1035 exchange that over. We're going to get into more detail on that. This one's my favorite. We can max fund a policy beyond the standard limits. So, talking about policy design, if you pay any amount of money into a policy, again, where can it go? The premium or the PUA component? We often talk about that 1090 split. A lot of the larger mutual companies will allow you to 10x your minimum base premium as far as a total payment into a policy per year. Meaning, if I have a $10,000 base premium, I can pay up to $100,000 per year. A 1035 exchange is one way that I can exceed those limits. Meaning, I can have a 1090 split where I pay in $100,000 per year, but if I have $500,000 in an old policy, I can transfer that over, and that's on top of my $100,000 payment, of which 10K was still the base premium. We're going to look at an example on exactly this. Point being, it really exceeds the first year standard limits and helps accelerate the cash value growth. That's a huge advantage. Now, we're talking about all the good stuff here. What's the potential drawback? Because we've got to know this as well. This is very, very important. Everyone always focuses on the benefits. So, when it comes to the cons or drawbacks to a 1035 exchange, it's a new policy, new expenses. Meaning, if I took out a policy 10 years ago, when I'm 30 years old, 10 years later, that new policy is based on what? My present age of 40. So I've got to consider that. The next piece, underwriting. My age and health is considered. Did my health change at all? Do I have an ultra preferred rating back in the day when I took out that first policy? Now I'm not as healthy. I've got to consider that, study the numbers carefully. It may not make sense. Going back to the new policy, when we take out a cash value life insurance policy, we talk about this a lot. Money again can go toward the premium or the PUA component. What happens with that base premium, especially in the first year and sometimes first and second year, depending on the type of policy we buy? The company overcharges us for the base premium up front. Meaning, if we go back to that $10,000 base premium, we do not see that show up in cash value in the first year. The company's overcharging me for the death benefit. This happens here again with a 1035 exchange. It happens with any new policy. The 1035 exchange funds can pay the base premium for us, or it can be rolled over in a pure large PUA payment. There's often PUA fees as well, which there will be an expense on that piece too. So it's something we've got to see up front before we just say, hey, this one looks like the best option. Let's roll my funds over because I like this new company in this illustration. So the existing policy, question, is it past the first and second year? I want to look at that. Some things to consider here. This is very important. Either we'll want to watch this piece a couple times or take notes here. Number one, avoid the illustration game. Meaning, I can take an existing policy that most people have and illustrate a 1035 exchange to a different company and make the new policy look oh so much better. The thing I've got to be aware of is actual performance. Will that actually happen? I'll give you an example. If you take the 4 major mutual companies right now, Northwestern Mutual would be at the bottom of the pack in terms of their dividend rate at 5% and what they illustrate in terms of illustrated values. Often, individuals will come to us with a Northwestern Mutual policy that might be 5 years, 10 years old, maybe it's only 2 or 3 years old. And they ask the question, hey, should I 1035 exchange this? They're beyond the first and second year. The answer is often no. I'll look at it and say, hey, the policy was designed for high cash value or is designed decently, but you're positioned with a company that I've consistently seen deliver to their policyholders. So just as far as my best interest or my recommendation, I would not recommend 1035ing it over just because I've always seen that company perform. Of course, you have the option. The decision is yours. Perhaps you want more flexibility. Maybe that's a reason why. So there's several items that can weigh into my decision-making process. However, from a performance standpoint, Northwestern Mutual may not illustrate that great of values. But again, I've got a good sense they're going to deliver. The same would be true if one had a policy through a New York Life, through a Guardian, a Mass Mutual, whatever it might be. If it's a pure performance piece and we're looking at the policy design and such, we say, hey, if it doesn't make sense, we're not going to do it, even though the new policy we look at might illustrate better values. Got to be aware of this piece, because just because it illustrates better values does not mean it's going to deliver greater values. This goes on in the insurance industry more than anything else. Who projects the best values? Here's what I like to look at. Guaranteed values. This is fun to look at. Based on the guarantees, if I 1035 exchange a policy, will I come out ahead on the new policy compared to keeping the old one? Maybe it makes sense to just stop payments on the old one or pay just the base premium. Perhaps I'm beyond the 7th year. I don't like the way my old policy is performing, but I don't want to 1035 exchange it because I'm going to give up performance. Maybe I just look at a reduced paid up option where I can eliminate the premium and let it continue to grow instead of executing a 1035 exchange. These are options. There's no one answer to say this is always the best way to go. It's more so building consumer awareness. This way, when you see the different options, you can select the one that is best for you instead of being told this is the best way to go. There's a lot of options. Last thing here, this is a good point. Can changes be made to my existing policy? A lot of people are not aware of this, that you can take an existing policy, maybe I'm paying in $100K, and let's just pretend that this policy is a 100% base premium policy. Nothing going into PUAs. Now this, what I'm about to go through, may or may not be possible depending on the MEC limit on that policy, but a lot of times you can make changes to an existing policy and rework the policy where we reduce the base premium. A lot of times we can't cut it down to 10%, but maybe you can cut it down to 40%. And then of that 100K, you can get 60% into PUAs. But that policy's existing, it's in force already, so you could be beyond the first and second year. That might make sense instead of a 1035 exchange. 1035 might make sense too. my point is here, this is something I definitely like to see first with anyone and everyone we work with before just saying, hey, let's look at it, numbers look good, okay, roll it over. That happens way too much in the industry, and then we find out after the fact, I shouldn't have done that, I lost money. But there's a lot to weigh into it. Performance is one thing, flexibility is another. Again, the more information we have, the better. So let's look at a performance piece, and what I'm going to touch on here, funding beyond the standard limits, because this is an advantage, not guaranteed and guaranteed values. Let's pull up our screen share here. Voila, okay. 1035 exchange, exceeding the limits. Let's give ourselves a little bit more space. There we go. So, on the left, we've got a policy on a 50-year-old male paying in $100,000 per year for 10 years with no 1035 exchange. This is just a flat 1090 split, maximizing the cash value. He wants to pay into it up until age 60 and then stop. He might keep funding, so we built the ability to do that, but then stop after 10 years. That $3 million death benefit has to do with the MEC testing for a 10-year fund. So, base premium, $10,000. He's got a term rider attached as well, but his net payment, the majority of this is a PUA payment, is directed towards cash value, towards PUAs. What's highlighted in yellow represents the break-even or positive point, year 4. So, again, you'll see this a lot in our videos. Max funded policy, 50-year-old male, okay, it looks great. After the 10 years, pays in nothing, cash value keeps on growing. Okay. Compared to same 1090 split policy, same company, same 50-year-old male, but with a 1035 exchange of $500,000. So we're pretending one has a $500,000 policy, and it makes sense to 1035 it. We've gone over every possible scenario with that existing policy, and the policyholder makes a decision saying, hey, after analyzing everything, I want to consolidate. So what he's got here, $10,000 base premium, same net out of pocket of $100,000, and then a $500,000 1035 exchange, which will function because he's covering the base premium out of pocket as a pure PUA payment. Dump it right into cash value. Now here's the thing I want to touch on, two things. One, look at the death benefit. It's much higher than the last example on the left. It was $3 million without a 1035 exchange. It is now $4.8 million. This has to do with two things. One, the term rider, we made it a bit bigger so I could pay in $100 for 10 years, but mainly with the MEC testing. So we've got more information on this in our membership program and especially our agent training program for those of you that work with us that are in the business. But when we have a 1035 exchange transaction, when we roll funds over, that will have an impact on the initial MEC limit. Typically it lowers it, meaning if $4.8 million gets me a $100,000 MEC limit, and then I have a 1035 exchange, that same 4.8 might get me $70,000 in MEC space. Depends on the size coming over. Here we structure the policy so it would not MEC, and we could pump in the 100 for 10 years. But here's what we got, highlighted in yellow. So he paid in by year 2, $200,000 out of pocket. This $100,000 includes the base premium payment, and he rolled over $500K. So by year 2, he's paid in 2, transferred 5, net of $700K. It's about $690 by year 2. One thing I would like to do here, and if we can obtain this data with those we're working with, we do, is track the payments and break-even point of the original policy to see how close we're on break-even or if we're positive already, because then technically we're taking a step back here, which, again, awareness is important there. But positive here, between years 2 and 3, continues to pump into it, looks good. Very good. And then the same policy on the far right, same scenario, but with the guarantees only. This is the fun part. if you're a nerd like me. All right, so exact same policy. These two are the same. Only difference, the cash value in the first year is actually identical. 577, 633, there we go. Break-even point, by year 3, a net of 700 has gone into the policy. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 800. And you're just about there. You're at 797, 798. By year 4, you're positive. So to break even on year 3, based off the guaranteed values on a policy, really the only way to truly get that with a whole life product like what you're seeing here is with a 1035 exchange. It's because we've got this huge infusion of cash value coming in right off the bat, where our base premium is only $10,000. Very attractive in that respect. I mean, if we were to do the math here, what would you have? Total input is what? 600,000 in year 1, and your base premium's 10,000. So a little over 1.5% in the first year as far as your premium to PUA ratio. That'd be nice, right? A 199 split or 1.5. Now, consistently, we can't do that, right? We are capped out at the 1090 moving forward. That's why we see this design. We can make it a little more aggressive than this, but we optimized everything. Point being, you can exceed that first year limit. That is one thing I like about it, but at the same time, to not just say, oh, it's the best thing, let's do it. We like to look at all the options and see, does it make sense when I consider my old policy as well, when I weigh in the cons, look at the pros and cons of any strategy, does it still make sense? Know this is a lot of information. If you have any questions on an existing policy, current policies, considering a policy, reach out anytime. We'd love to talk to you and potentially work with you. And as always, I hope this helps. Hey guys, Steve Parisi here. If you enjoyed the content you just saw, please subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you'd like more information or to see some custom policies for yourself, feel free to call or email our offices at the contact information below.